My name is Elena Vasquez, and for 3 years, I was invisible to everyone at Meridian Financial Tower. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd badge into the gleaming 50-story skyscraper in downtown Chicago, pushing my cleaning cart through marble lobbies and carpeted executive floors. The overnight security guards would nod politely, "Morning, Elena," before returning to their crossword puzzles. The early arriving executives would step around me like I was furniture. Their phones pressed to their ears as they discussed million-dollar deals I pretended not to understand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nobody knew that less than 5 years ago, I was Operative 7 Alpha for the Central Intelligence Agency, fluent in 8 languages, trained in 17 different methods of silent elimination, and responsible for extracting assets from hostile territories across 3 continents. They saw a middle-aged Latina woman in a gray uniform, methodically emptying wastebaskets and sanitizing surfaces. They had no idea that I could kill them with the spray bottle clipped to my belt, or that I memorized every face, every conversation, every detail that passed through those halls. I chose invisibility. After my partner Miguel was killed during a botched extraction in Prague, after I'd held his bleeding body in a bombed-out safe house while enemy forces closed in, after I'd had to leave him behind to complete the mission, I was done. The agency offered me a desk job, a promotion, even early retirement with full benefits. Instead, I walked away completely. Changed my name from Elena Restrepo to Elena Vasquez, moved to Chicago, and became someone who cleaned up other people's messes instead of creating international incidents. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 15 years, I'd lived in shadows by necessity, gathering intelligence, manipulating situations, staying invisible to survive. Now I was invisible by choice, and it was almost peaceful. Almost. My routine was meditation. 5th floor first accounting and HR, where the gossip was usually about office romances and whose vacation requests got approved. 6th through 20th floors were middle management, a maze of cubicles where people complained about their bosses and dreamed of promotions they'd never get. 21st through 40th were the executives, corner offices with views of Lake Michigan and conversations about acquisitions and market manipulation. That would have interested my former CIA colleagues immensely. The top 10 floors were the penthouse level, the C-suite executives, board members, and the kind of people who owned private jets in small countries. I knew everyone's secrets. Jessica in accounting was embezzling money through fake vendor accounts. I'd seen the duplicate invoices in her shredder pile. Marcus from marketing was selling client lists to competitors. His browser history was visible every time I cleaned his computer screen. The CFO, Richard Hawthorne, was cooking the books to inflate quarterly earnings, hiding massive losses through a complex web of shell companies I'd mapped out from documents carelessly left on his desk. But none of that was my problem anymore. I wasn't Elena the CIA operative, gathering intelligence to protect national interests. I was just Elena the cleaning lady, invisible and safe, until Tuesday morning, when everything changed. I was on the 42nd floor, emptying trash in the executive conference room, when I heard voices approaching down the hallway. My training kicked in: automatically assess, evaluate, position. I moved to the far corner behind the presentation screen, ostensibly organizing cleaning supplies, but actually listening. "The target list is confirmed," a voice said in heavily accented English. Russian, I noted. Moscow dialect, educated background. Probably military. All primary assets will be present for the board meeting tomorrow. My blood went cold. Assets. Military terminology. Russian speaker. Discussion of a target list. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was something much worse. "Excellent," replied another voice. This one I recognized: James Morrison, Meridian's head of security. He'd been hired 6 months ago, supposedly from the FBI. Clean-cut, professional, always polite when he saw me in the hallways. The cleaning lady planted the devices yesterday night. Everything is in position. My heart stopped. The cleaning lady. They were talking about me, but I hadn't planted any devices, which meant the thermal charges are set throughout the building's structural supports, Morrison continued. The gas release will begin at exactly 10 a.m. during the board meeting. Emergency services will assume it's a natural gas explosion, followed by building collapse. No survivors, no investigation into the overseas accounts. And Meridian's debt to our clients disappears with everyone who knows about it. I pressed myself flatter against the wall, my mind racing. They were going to blow up the building. Kill everyone. Frame me for it. The Russian connection suggested international players, probably the same Eastern European crime syndicate that had been infiltrating American financial institutions, the one my old CIA team had been tracking before. Miguel's death. What about witnesses? The Russian asked. The cleaning crew will be blamed posthumously, Morrison said. Elena Vasquez has the perfect background illegal immigrant, desperate for money, easy to manipulate. Her body will be found with evidence, linking her to the bombing. Case closed. Illegal immigrant. Another lie, but one that would play perfectly in the media. Elena Vasquez, the identity I'd carefully constructed, was clean legal residency, work permits, even a credit score. But dead women don't defend themselves, and Morrison clearly had the connections to plant whatever evidence he needed. They were using me as their fall guy, and then they were going to kill me along with everyone else in the building. The voices moved away down the corridor. I waited exactly 90 seconds, old habits, before emerging from my hiding spot. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled, but inside, something I'd thought was dead was roaring back to life. I had a choice. I could walk away, badge out early, claim I was sick, disappear into one of my prepared emergency identities, and watch the news coverage tomorrow night from a safe distance. It wasn't my fight anymore. These weren't my people. I'd done my time serving others, paid my dues in blood and guilt. But as I pushed my cleaning cart toward the elevator, I thought about Jessica in accounting, who brought homemade cookies for everyone's birthday. About David from IT, who showed me pictures of his new daughter every time we crossed paths. About Mrs. Chun from HR, who always asked about my family and tried to get me to sign up for the company's English classes. Not knowing I spoke better English than most of the executives, they were innocent. They were about to die because of financial crimes they knew nothing about, killed by people who saw them as acceptable collateral damage in a money laundering scheme. I thought about Miguel, bleeding out in Prague while I chose the mission over saving his life. How he'd looked at me in those final moments, not with anger, but with understanding. Do what you have to do, Elena. Save who you can save. I couldn't save him, but maybe I could save them. I checked my watch, 7:23 a.m. Less than 3 hours until the board meeting, until Morrison's timeline began. Not enough time to call in the FBI or CIA. I had no proof, and even if they believed me, they'd evacuate the building and lose the chance to catch the entire network. Morrison would disappear, the Russians would abort, and they'd try again somewhere else with different fall guys. No. If I was going to stop this, I had to do it myself. I had to become Elena Restrepo again. First, I needed intel. I took the elevator to the basement level where the building's security office was located. The advantage of being invisible was that I had access everywhere: master keys, security codes, the trust of people who never really looked at me. The guard station was empty. Shift change at 7:30. I slipped inside and pulled up the building's security system on the main computer. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, bypassing password protections with techniques I'd learned at Langley 15 years ago. The camera footage confirmed my worst fears. Over the past 3 days, while I'd been cleaning floors above, Morrison had been bringing in fake maintenance crews during overnight hours. Men in coveralls carrying toolboxes, accessing utility closets and structural areas. I watched them place small devices throughout the building's support columns. Professional work, military precision, but there was something else. Another cleaning cart, identical to mine, being pushed by a woman in the same gray uniform. She was placing smaller devices, gas canisters, I realized, in ventilation shafts throughout the upper floors. Morrison's cleaning lady. She was Asian. Slight build, moved like someone with combat training. I enhanced the image and felt my blood turn to ice. Li Wei, Chinese Ministry of State Security operative. I'd tangled with her twice during my CIA days, once in Singapore, once in Kazakhstan. She was vicious, efficient, and completely immoral. If Li Wei was involved, this wasn't just about money. Laundering. This was about eliminating key American financial executives, destabilizing markets, possibly triggering a larger economic crisis. The scope was bigger than I'd thought, and it was already too late to handle this quietly. I copied the security footage to an encrypted drive and moved to Phase 2, mapping the explosives. Using the building schematics and the camera footage, I identified 12 thermal charges placed throughout the structural supports. Military-grade C4, based on the size and placement. Enough to bring down the entire building in a controlled collapse that would look like a gas explosion to investigators. The gas canisters were more insidious. Placed in ventilation systems serving the upper floors, they'd release an aerosol toxin, probably something odorless and fast-acting that would incapacitate everyone before the explosives detonated. Clean, efficient, and completely invisible to emergency responders who would assume everyone died in the explosion. 8:15 a.m. Less than 2 hours. I had to disable the devices, but I couldn't do it alone. Li Wei would be monitoring the building, and Morrison's security protocols would detect any tampering. I needed a distraction, an inside ally, and a way to turn their own plan against them. That's when I remembered Marcus from marketing, the one who'd been selling client lists to competitors. Corporate espionage was a federal crime, but it was also leverage. I found him in his cubicle on the 14th floor, nervously typing at his computer. When I approached with my cleaning cart, he barely looked up. "Marcus," I said quietly. "We need to talk." He glanced up, annoyed. "I'm busy. Can you come back later?" "It's about your extracurricular activities," I said, switching from my carefully practiced broken English to perfect, unaccented speech. "The ones involving client lists and offshore accounts." His face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Booth Industrial, Cerberus Holdings, Phoenix Dynamics," I recited calmly. 43 client lists in the past 6 months, sold for an average of $15,000 each. You've made quite a profit. Who are you?" "Someone who needs your help to save everyone in this building," I said, "including you." I explained quickly the explosives, the gas attack, Morrison's plan, the timeline. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind until I showed him the security footage on my phone. "This is insane," he whispered. "You're the cleaning lady. You can single quotes T. Who are you?" "Right now, I'm the only person who can stop this," I said. "But I need access to the building's emergency systems, fire suppression, ventilation controls, elevator management." "You work with IT support. You can get me administrative access without triggering security alerts. Why should I trust you?" "How do I know you're not?" I moved faster than he could track, spinning him around and applying a blood choke that rendered him unconscious in 3 seconds. When he came to 15 seconds later, I was back to my normal position, calmly wiping down his computer monitor. "Because if I wanted to hurt you," I said conversationally, "you'd already be dead. Now are you going to help me save everyone's life Or do I have to find someone else who understands the concept of mutually assured destruction? Marcus nodded frantically. 20 minutes later, I had administrative access to the building's systems. Marcus had performed beautifully under pressure, his corporate espionage skills translating perfectly to legitimate hacking. He'd even helped me create false maintenance orders that would give me cover to access restricted areas. 8:45 a.m., 1 hour and 15 minutes. What do you need me to do? Marcus asked. He'd moved beyond panic into a kind of focused determination. Crisis had a way of bringing out people's true character. Get to the lobby, I said. Start evacuating people quietly. Fire drill, gas leak, anything that gets them out without triggering Morrison's security protocols. Don't let anyone use the elevators after 9:30. And Marcus? Yeah? If I don't make it out of this, everything on that drive goes to the FBI. Your client list problems will be the least of your worries, but at least you'll be alive to face them. He nodded and headed for the stairwell. I watched him go, hoping I'd made the right choice. In the CIA, you learn to trust your instincts about people. Marcus was weak, greedy, and morally compromised. But he wasn't evil, and right now, that was enough. Now for the hard part. I changed out of my cleaning uniform in a utility closet on the 35th floor, pulling on maintenance coveralls I'd taken from Morrison's fake crew. The buildings. Cameras would show a maintenance worker moving through restricted areas, nothing unusual. Just someone checking on the overnight repairs. The first explosive device was in a utility closet on the 22nd floor, attached to a primary support beam. Military-grade C4 with a digital timer, set to detonate at 10:15 a.m. I photographed the device, then carefully examined the wiring. Professional work, but not perfect. The detonation circuit used a standard cell phone trigger with a backup timer. I could disable the timer, but if Morrison had remote detonation capability, he could still set it off manually. I needed to disrupt the signal while making it look like the device was still functional, using tools from my cleaning cart. Wire strippers, disguised as box cutters, small magnets hidden in the handle of my spray bottle, I carefully rerouted the detonation circuit through a relay switch I'd built from a broken cell phone. The device would still show active on any monitoring system, but it wouldn't actually detonate. 1 down. 11 to go. The second device was trickier, located in a mechanical room that required key card access. I used Marcus's IT credentials to override the lock, but the room was equipped with motion sensors. I had to move like I belonged there, maintaining the cover of a maintenance worker while performing surgery on military explosives. This device was newer, more sophisticated. Chinese manufacture, I noted. Li Wei's contribution. The timer was integrated into the explosive compound itself. Tamper with it wrong, and it would detonate immediately. I spent precious minutes studying the mechanism, calling up half-forgotten training from CIA technical courses. Then I noticed something, a manufacturing flaw in the wiring harness. A tiny gap where the insulation had been stripped too short, exposing bare wire to moisture. In the humid mechanical room, condensation would eventually cause a short circuit. I helped it along, using conductive gel from a packet hidden in my cleaning supplies. The short would disable the device gradually, over several minutes, making it look like equipment failure rather than sabotage. 2 down. 9:15 a.m. 1 hour until the board meeting. I moved through the building like a ghost, disabling explosive devices with increasingly creative methods. Rerouted circuits, introduced manufacturing flaws, created false signals that would show the devices as active while actually rendering them inert. Each one was different, requiring different techniques, but my muscle memory was coming back. 15 years of training, compressed into 45 minutes of intense focus. The gas canisters were harder. Li Wei had placed them in ventilation shafts throughout the upper floors, rigged to release simultaneously at 10:05 5 minutes before the explosions. The aerosol would incapacitate everyone, making them helpless when the building came down. But I knew Li Wei's methods. She was precise, efficient, and predictable. Each canister would be identical, placed according to a mathematical pattern that optimized dispersal. If I could identify the pattern, I could predict the locations. I found the first one in a ventilation shaft on the 37th floor. Sophisticated device pressurized canister with a timed release valve connected to the building's ventilation system. The label was in Chinese characters, but I recognized the chemical formula. VX nerve agent, modified for aerosol delivery. Incredibly lethal, virtually undetectable. Li Wei had been busy. I couldn't disable all the canisters in time, but I didn't need to. The building's ventilation system was computerized, controlled by a central management system. If I could reverse the airflow, make the system suck air out instead of blowing it in, the gas would be drawn away from occupied areas and vented to the outside. Using Marcus's access codes, I logged into the building management system and began reprogramming the ventilation controls. It was complex work. I had to make changes that would activate automatically at the right time, without triggering any security alarms that might alert Morrison. 9:35 a.m. 25 minutes. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Building evacuation in progress. Security breach detected. Abort mission parameters. Morrison. He'd noticed people leaving, realized his plan was compromised, which meant he'd either abort entirely or accelerate the timeline. I needed to find him before he decided to detonate everything immediately. The executive floors were nearly empty. Marcus had done his job well. I took the stairs to the penthouse level, where the board meeting was scheduled to take place. The 49th floor conference room overlooking Lake Michigan, where Meridian's executives would gather to discuss quarterly earnings and unknowingly walk into an assassination plot. I found Morrison in the security office on the 48th floor, frantically working at multiple computer screens. He looked up as I entered, and his expression shifted from confusion to recognition to alarm. "You," he said, reaching for his shoulder holster. "You're supposed to be—" I was across the room before he could draw his weapon, my cleaning cart. Forgotten as Elena Vasquez disappeared and Elena Restrepo took control. The nerve strike to his wrist paralyzed his gun hand. The follow-up blow to his solar plexus dropped him to his knees, gasping. "James Morrison," I said, restraining him with zip ties I'd taken from his own equipment. Former FBI agent turned private contractor. Currently employed by Volkov Enterprises to eliminate key executives at Meridian Financial. He stared at me, still struggling to breathe. "Who are you?" "Someone you should have researched more carefully before choosing as your fall guy," I said, checking his computer screens. "Let me guess, Li Wei convinced you that hiring a cleaning lady would make perfect cover. Invisible, disposable, easily blamed. Except you picked the wrong invisible woman." The screens showed the building's security feeds, emergency systems, and a countdown timer, 18 minutes until automatic detonation. Morrison had built in a safety protocol. If he didn't input a cancellation code every hour, the devices would detonate automatically. The code, Morrison. He shook his head defiant, even with his hands zip-tied behind his back. "You can't stop this. There are backup systems, redundant triggers. Even if you disable everything, Li Wei has manual overrides. Where is she?" "Find out yourself," he sneered. "You're too late anyway. The board members are all ready." An explosion shook the building. Not the full detonation Morrison had planned, too small, too isolated, but definitely an explosive device. The fire alarm began blaring throughout the building. I checked Morrison's security feeds and saw the source, the 32nd floor, where I'd disabled one of the thermal charges. Smoke was pouring from a utility room, but the structure looked intact. The device had malfunctioned, detonated prematurely with only a fraction of its intended force. which meant my sabotage wasn't perfect. Some of the devices might still be partially functional. Backup systems, Morrison said, smiling despite his restraints. You can disable the timers, reroute the circuits, but you can't change military-grade explosives into fireworks. Physics doesn't work that way. He was right. I'd reduced the explosive force and disrupted the coordinated timing, but there were still 12 devices throughout the building. Even functioning at reduced capacity, they could cause significant damage. Needed to find Li Wei and end this permanently. 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes until the board meeting. Until Li Wei activated whatever backup plan she had prepared. Morrison's security feeds showed most of the building had been evacuated, but there were still people on the upper floors, executives who had arrived early for the board meeting, security. Personnel, a few employees who hadn't gotten the evacuation message. Maybe 40 people total, scattered across 10 floors. I zip-tied Morrison to his chair and took his access cards, weapon, and communication equipment. His radio was tuned to a secured frequency, and I could hear Li Wei's voice giving orders in Mandarin. Structural charges compromised. Initiating Protocol 7. All assets to extraction point. Protocol 7. I remembered that from my CIA files on Chinese. MSS operations, systematic elimination of witnesses before tactical withdrawal. Li Wei wasn't just aborting the mission. She was killing everyone who could identify her. The radio crackled again. Cleaning lady neutralized. Building sealed. Beginning final sweep. Cleaning lady neutralized. She thought I was dead, probably killed by the premature explosion on the 32nd floor. Which gave me an advantage. Li Wei thought she was hunting security guards and executives, not a former CIA operative. I moved through the stairwell toward the upper floors, following the sound of gunfire echoing down from above. Li Wei was working her way down, floor by floor, methodically eliminating witnesses. Professional, efficient, and completely ruthless. I found the first body on the 46th floor. A security guard, shot twice in the chest at close range. Clean kill, no struggle, no time to radio for help. Li Wei had probably approached him as a maintenance worker, gained his trust, then eliminated him before he could react. The second body was in the conference room on the 47th floor, an executive who'd arrived early for a pre-meeting briefing. Same method, close-range shots, professional execution. No evidence left behind. I was tracking her pattern when I heard voices from the 48th floor, the same floor where I'd left Morrison tied up in the security office, not moving carefully. I approached the voices and peered around a corner. Li Wei was standing over Morrison, who was still zip-tied to his chair. She had a pistol pointed at his head, speaking in rapid English. You said the cleaning lady was eliminated. She was. Morrison protested. The explosion on 32. The explosion that failed to bring down the building. The explosion that disabled exactly one device while leaving the others mysteriously malfunctioned. Li Wei's voice was cold, controlled. Someone has been systematically sabotaging our operation. Someone with technical expertise and detailed knowledge of our plan. It's impossible. Elena Vasquez is nobody. Illegal immigrant, no education, no background. Li Wei pressed the gun harder against his temple. Elena Vasquez doesn't exist. I ran comprehensive background checks after you. Suggested her as our fall guy. The identity is fabricated, created approximately 4 years ago using CIA quality documentation. My blood ran cold. Li Wei had made me. She knew Elena Vasquez was a cover identity, which meant she'd probably figured out who I really was. The question, Li Wei continued, is whether Elena Vasquez is CIA, FBI, or something else. But it doesn't matter now. She's disabled our primary plan, but not our contingency. She pulled a device from her jacket, a dead man switch with a digital readout. Manual detonation override. Every device in the building, simultaneous activation. I simply release this trigger, and physics takes care of the rest. Morrison's eyes widened. You'll kill us too. We're still in the building. Acceptable losses, Li Wei said. The mission parameters have changed. Total elimination is now the priority. I had seconds to act. Li Wei's finger was on the trigger. And even if I could take her down, any disruption might cause her to release the switch and detonate every device in the building. But I had one advantage she didn't know about. While she'd been hunting witnesses and interrogating Morrison, I'd been reprogramming the building's emergency systems. The fire alarm that had been blaring for the past 10 minutes wasn't just noise. It was my signal dot at exactly 9:52 a.m. Every fire suppression system in the building activated simultaneously. Sprinkler heads released dense fog instead of water mixture I'd created using cleaning chemicals and compounds from Li Wei's own gas canisters. The fog wasn't lethal, but it was thick, disorienting, and would mask heat signatures from any thermal imaging equipment. Li Wei spun toward the nearest sprinkler, momentarily distracted by the unexpected development. That was all the opening I needed. I moved like water, flowing through the fog-filled room with the silent grace that had made me one of the CIA's most effective operatives. Li Wei was good. She tracked my movement and fired 3 shots at where I should have been. But I was already behind her, inside her guard, applying a sleeper hold that would render her unconscious in seconds. She dropped faster than expected, the dead man's switch falling from her relaxed fingers. I caught the device before it hit the floor, holding the trigger depressed while checking Li Wei's pulse. Alive but unconscious, exactly what I needed. Morrison stared at me through the fog with a mixture of terror and confusion. Elena Vasquez, I presume, he said weakly. Elena Restrepo, I corrected, securing Li Wei's hands with her own zip ties. CIA Operations Division, retired. And you too. Just made my retirement very interesting. 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes until the board meeting that was no longer happening. I checked Li Wei's equipment and found exactly what I expected: backup detonation devices, multiple communication channels, and detailed surveillance equipment that had been monitoring every move I'd made for the past 3 hours. She'd known about the disabled explosives, the reprogrammed ventilation system, even my alliance with Marcus, but she hadn't known about the fire suppression system modifications, which meant I still had tactical advantage. The dead man switch showed all devices still active and armed. Even with my sabotage, releasing the trigger would cause massive damage and casualties. I needed a way to disarm everything permanently without triggering an explosion. That's when I noticed something in Li Wei's equipment that changed everything. A secondary control device, disguised as a maintenance tablet, that showed detailed schematics of every explosive device in the building. Not just their locations, but their technical specifications, wiring diagrams, and most importantly, their disarm codes. Li Wei had been paranoid about maintaining control. She'd built backdoors into every device, ways to disable them remotely if the mission parameters changed. What she hadn't expected was someone else gaining access to her control systems. Working quickly, I used the tablet to send shutdown codes to every explosive device in the building. One by one, the indicators changed from red to yellow to green. As the devices powered down and rendered themselves inert, the gas canisters were harder. They required manual intervention to prevent accidental release. But the building's modified ventilation system was already sucking the air out of affected areas. Even if some gas was released, it would be immediately vented to the outside atmosphere, where it would disperse harmlessly. 10:02 m. The crisis was over. I secured both Morrison and Li Wei, then used Morrison's radio to contact the FBI and local police. The building would need to be evacuated completely while bomb disposal experts removed the disabled devices. but the immediate threat had passed. As I waited for federal agents to arrive, I walked to the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The early morning sun was reflecting off the water, and far below, I could see people gathering on the sidewalks, Meridian employees who had evacuated, emergency responders setting up a command post, news crews arriving to cover what they thought was a routine building evacuation. None of them would ever know how close they had come to dying. That was probably for the best. My phone buzzed. Text message from Marcus. Everyone's out. Building secure. FBI en route. You saved us all. I smiled, thinking about Mrs. Chun from HR, who would go home tonight to her family without ever knowing she'd been targeted for assassination. About Jessica in accounting, who would continue embezzling small amounts of money, a crime that seemed almost quaint compared to international terrorism. About David from IT, who would show me pictures of his daughter growing up, assuming I'd still be around to see them. The FBI arrived 12 minutes later, a full tactical team with bomb disposal experts, counter-terrorism specialists, and enough firepower to level the building themselves. I met them in the lobby, still wearing my maintenance coveralls, and handed over Lee Way Morrison and all the evidence I'd gathered. Elena Restrepo, I said to the team leader, showing him my old CI identification. I think we need to talk. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. I explained everything: my retirement from the CIA, my cover identity as Elena Vasquez, the discovery of the plot, the systematic sabotage of the explosives, and the final confrontation with Lee Way and Morrison. The FBI was impressed but skeptical. You handled this entire operation solo? Agent Sarah Martinez asked. No backup, no support, no official authorization? I was a cleaning lady who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, I said. Sometimes that's all it takes. Lee Way and Morrison were charged with terrorism, conspiracy, and multiple counts of attempted murder. The investigation revealed a network of similar operations, targeting financial institutions across the United States, a systematic campaign to destabilize the American economy by eliminating key executives and triggering market panic. My testimony was classified, my involvement minimized in public reports. The official story was that an alert employee had noticed suspicious activity and contacted authorities, who had responded quickly to prevent a potential tragedy. Elena Vasquez, the cleaning lady who had saved everyone, was never mentioned by name, which was exactly how I wanted it. 3 weeks later, I returned to work at Meridian Financial Tower. The building had been thoroughly swept by bomb disposal. Experts, the security systems upgraded, and new protocols implemented to prevent future infiltration. James Morrison was replaced by a former Secret Service agent with an impeccable background, and the cleaning staff underwent enhanced background checks. I passed all the new security requirements, of course. Elena Vasquez's documentation was perfect. Her employment history clean, her references solid. The investigators never suspected that their model employee was the same person who had single-handedly dismantled an international terrorism operation. Morning, Elena, the new security guard said as I badged in at 5 a.m. on my first day back. Morning, Tom, I replied, pushing my cleaning cart toward the elevators. He was former military, I could tell from his posture, the way his eyes tracked movement, the unconscious way he positioned himself near cover points. Good instincts, professional training, probably combat experience. He would be an asset if anything like this ever happened again, which it wouldn't, of course. Lightning doesn't strike twice, and the chances of stumbling into another international conspiracy were essentially zero. The elevator carried me to the 5th floor, where I began my usual routine. Empty wastebaskets, sanitized surfaces, dust furniture, vacuum carpets. Meditation through repetition, peace through invisibility. But as I worked, I noticed things I'd missed before. How the new security cameras had blind spots that could be exploited. How the upgraded access controls still relied on predictable human behavior. How the emergency systems I'd modified during the crisis had vulnerabilities that had determined attacker could exploit. Old habits, apparently. Died hard. Jessica in accounting greeted me with fresh cookies, chocolate chip, my favorite though. I'd never told her that. She was still embezzling money, but she'd reduced the amounts and diversified her methods, making detection much harder. Smart adaptation. Marcus from marketing nodded nervously when I passed his cubicle. He'd stopped selling client lists and had even reported several suspicious contacts to the new security team. Crisis had a way of clarifying people's priorities. Mrs. Chun from HR asked about my family, as always, and invited me to sign up for the company's new self-defense classes. You never know when you might need to protect yourself, she said with genuine concern. I thanked her but declined. I had all the self-defense training I needed. By 7 a.m. I'd completed the 5th through 20th floors and was starting on the executive levels. The same routine, the same invisibility, the same careful balance between Elena Vasquez, the cleaning lady, and Elena Restrepo, the retired CIA operative. But something had changed during those 3 hours when I'd fought to save everyone in the code building. I'd remembered who I was beneath the cover identity, what I was capable of when people needed protection. I'd felt the satisfaction of using my skills for something that mattered, the rightness of standing between innocent people and those who would harm them. Miguel would have been proud. As I emptied the waste paper basket in the 42nd floor conference room, the same room where I'd first overheard Morrison's plot, I found myself thinking about other buildings, other targets, other cleaning ladies who might not have the training to recognize threats or the skills to stop them. There were probably dozens of Elena Vasquez's scattered across the country, retired operatives, former military personnel, discharged law enforcement, officers who had chosen invisibility over continued service, people with extraordinary capabilities hiding in ordinary jobs, protecting their own peace by avoiding the conflicts that had once defined them. But what if we didn't have to choose? What if there was a way to maintain our chosen invisibility while still being ready when innocent people needed protection? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through encrypted contacts I hadn't used in years. CIA colleagues who had also retired, former military friends who had transitioned to civilian life, law enforcement officers who had left active duty, people like me who had specialized skills and a desire to help, but who valued their privacy and civilian status. The idea was taking shape as I worked through the morning cleaning routine. Not a formal organization, nothing that would attract official attention or compromise our cover identities. Just a network of ordinary people with extraordinary backgrounds, positioned in ordinary jobs where they could watch, listen, and act when necessary. Cleaning ladies and security guards, maintenance workers and office administrators, waitresses and taxi drivers. Invisible people in invisible jobs, connected by encrypted communications and bound by a simple principle: protect innocent people when they can't protect themselves. I composed a careful message on an encrypted platform, sent it to 12 former colleagues scattered across different agencies and military branches. The message was simple: